Hi, everyone. Good evening, and sorry about the late start. We had some technical issues. I'm Angela Martinez with Harris County Public Library, and we're live today from Galena Park Library. Thank you all for joining us, and we're happy to present a conversation with young adult author Axie OH. Axie OH is a first-generation Korean American born in NYC and raised in New Jersey. She studied Korean history and creative writing as an undergrad at the University of California, San Diego, and holds a MFA from Lesley University in writing for young people. Her passions include K-pop, anime, stationery supplies, and milk tea. She currently resides in Las Vegas, Nevada, with her dogs. Axie's book XOXO was selected for HCPL's Tournament of Books 2022 reading list. XOXO is a modern forbidden romance wrapped in the glamorous and exclusive world of K-pop. Tournament Books is a competitive book club for teens and was designed to develop and encourage a love of reading. Books are chosen from the latest selections in young adult literature, and criteria for selection includes diversity in characters and themes, relevant and relatable subject matter, originality, and strong and memorable plot lines. Tournament Books is made possible by the generous support of the Harris County Friends of the Library. There will be a live Q&A, so be sure to leave your questions and comments in the comment section on Facebook or on YouTube. I am happy now to present Axie OH.
Hi, Angela. So happy to be here.
That we're finally live right now after the crazy start we had. So before we get started on questions this evening, could you please tell us more about yourself and about your books?
Yes, you did a great job introducing me, my bio. My name is Axie. I'm a Korean American author. XOXO is my third novel, and then my one that just came out is called The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea, which is a YA fantasy. And I write in all different genres of YA. And yeah, XOXO is a really fun book. It's about a girl who falls for a K-pop star. So I'm excited to talk to you today, Angela.
Yeah, thank you. And I love that you write different genres. You don't stick to one genre, because I know you think of some authors like, oh, Stephen King only writes horror, but he likes other things, writes fantasy too. So I like that you've gone for like dystopian sci-fi almost to a rom-com, and now to this to a retelling of a folklore. Sorry, right?
Yeah.
So let's get started on our questions. In XOXO, we see how Jenny and Jae-woo spark inspiration in each other. What sparked you to write about a girl falling for a K-pop star?
Yeah, so actually my publisher came to me. They're like, do you want to write a book where a girl falls for a K-pop star? And they knew that I loved K-pop because it's like in my bio. And they knew that I was a writer. And so I was like, you know what? Sure. So like just with that, just like one question, I wrote the entire book. I'm a huge not just K-pop fan, but I love Korean dramas and I love rom-coms, like movies and books. So it was like really fun for me to like we were talking earlier, I started in dystopia sci-fi. So like these dark, anime, mecha kind of stories. So it was really fun to do the XXO because I'm also a big, rom-com, K-drama, contemporary reader. And so it was like a fun thing that I was like, I can do that, and I did it.
Yeah, it was wonderful. It's a fun read, and you just kind of get pulled into the world of XOXO, and you want to find out what happens with Jenny and Jae-woo. Make sure it's a happy ending, and it should be, right? Because it's
a rom-com.
You got to go through the steps, right? So, did you draw any inspiration from bands to form XOXO? And do you have
Yeah, what were you say?
Oh, and do you have a favorite K-pop band?
Oh, okay. Ooh, that last question's hard. But I drew on like a lot of like boy bands. It was fun because Jenny, she's not a K-pop idol.
Right.
So it was fun because she's like seeing the world of K-pop from an outsider's perspective, which I think is like a really fun way to talk about K-pop. But so Jae-woo is like part of a 4-member boy group. So I just like look. I've been a K-pop fan, like I said, like for a long time. So I know all of the groups, and I follow a lot of the groups. So I sort of kind of worked with the dynamics from different, like all different groups, like obviously BTS, but also like Big Bang, NCT, Shiny, all these groups, EXO. I like knew them already because I'm such a fan and I know how
Mhm.
like the boys interact in the group. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna take parts from each group and like put them into my book. So it was really fun to do it that way. And like I'm such a fan, so it's kind of like putting my like, what would I want to read in
Right.
a book? Yeah.
And
And
like
favorite
creating
idol
the
group?
ultimate band group.
I was like, okay, well, I like when creating the group, I was like, I knew that like in most K-pop groups, there's a leader, there's a vocalist, there's a rapper, and there's always the youngest character. So I
Yeah.
was like, okay, that's perfect. That's 4 characters right there. um, and then my favorite group is so hard. I mean, right now, I love Red Velvet, which is a girl group.
Mhm.
I mean, I love all groups, but right now I'm like Red Velvet just is having comeback, and I'm like having a moment. But my favorite idol of all time is IU.
Mhm.
She's a solo artist, and I have every single one of her albums. She's my favorite.
Awesome. Um, so I know XOXO, like we mentioned, is a rom-com and it's a love story, but I like how it's not only about romantic love. You focus the book on family relationships, Jenny with her grandmother, and even with her grandmother as well. And you also look at the love between friendships, Jenny and her and making new friends, and even within the band, the brotherhood that they have there. So why do you think it's important that readers see these different types of love and relationships in a rom-com?
Yeah, I mean, I maybe it's just me, but when I write, it's I want other characters. Like I love characters. Characters are always come first for me as a writer, and I love quirky side characters. It's like just so much fun to write. And so I wanted Jenny to have not just like where it's the focus is just on the boy and her.
Hmm.
I wanted her to have friendships. Like that was really important to me. The friendship she has with another girl, Sori, in the book was like so much fun for me to write. And it was also like a fun trope that I could play with because there's always the trope of the mean girl. And then you're like, wait a second, let's think more on that. Like, why is she like this, right? There's levels to that. And then like the grandmother, Jenny's Harmonie, I thought was really fun because she's such a fun character to write. First of all, because she's just so cute. But she also gives a nice level of like Jenny kind of sees her mother through her grandmother's eyes, sort of
Hmm.
thing. And Jenny, who misunderstands a lot of what her mother does. Like her mother's very strict and her mother's very protective of her. She kind of comes to realize the reason for that is because of the relationship her mother had with her mother, which is Jenny's grandmother. So there's like a lot of things that I was playing with that I was having a lot of fun, especially the boy group. Their friendship was so much fun for me. And like I was saying, like there's a leader, there's a youngest member, and then there's a character who's the same age as my boy character, Chewu. So it's fun because like in that way, he can have different relationships. He has like an older brother type character, he has a younger brother type character, and then he has like a rival, as in someone who's his age, who's like his best friend, like your best friend who makes you a better person sort of character.
Hmm.
So yeah, so I thought it was really fun. I like playing with all the different relationships, and yeah, I think especially in books, you need a lot of different fun stuff happening, I think.
Yeah, and I like that because you can have a
Mhm.
fully formed character and
Yeah.
give them lives outside of just that one relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's what we all have, right? So as we mentioned, your book XO was chosen by our staff for the teams to read for tournament books. We discuss in our book parties how books can be mirrors for our own lives and windows into the lives of others. How important is it that we see Asian representation in young adult literature?
Yeah, I think it's so important, especially I mean, like, because growing up, there was very little Asian representation for me specifically. Um, like growing up in the 90s, there wasn't like any YA novels with Asian protagonists. If there were, they were usually immigrant stories, which is fine. Like I love immigrant stories, or like stories that focus on some sort of trauma. So I think nowadays you're getting like books like XOXO, which is it's just a rom-com. Like it's just a romance where the characters are Asian, the main character is Korean American. And then there's like so many great books out there that where the characters are just like magical and Asian. Like it's not about them like, you know, being oppressed. It's not about them immigrating, which, you know, those stories are very necessary. But you also need those fun stories, I feel like. And because that's what I didn't have growing up. There was like no fantasy with a Korean protagonist when I was growing up. So I was like, okay, so I'm gonna write my own. So I wrote this, and then, you know, there's a ton of K-pop books now, but
Yeah.
when I was growing up, there were none. So I'm so happy that Asian representation is happening, that people can see books like this being published and then be like, okay, I could do that. Like I can write, like if you're not Asian, if you're Black or Latina, like you can write your representation on the page now, and you can feel confident about it, which I think is so cool. Because I remember when I was young, I didn't what is kind of like what you see is what you think you can do.
Mm-hmm.
So like if I only ever saw white authors and I only ever saw books with white main characters. So I thought that like, so my first book, actually the main character was white because I didn't know that you could have Asian characters. And it wasn't until college when I saw an Asian author in person writing a book with an Asian protagonist. I was like, oh, you can do that? Like it was interesting because it was like a kind of light bulb moment for me, and I've like never looked back. And so I think it's really important that young people are seeing people who look like them as main characters. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's really it makes me so happy too, because I remember as a kid, those All American Girl dolls. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Yeah, they had like a Josefina one. I'm like, oh my gosh, she's Hispanic like me.
Yeah.
Like that was
Yeah.
like my favorite.
Yeah.
So those kind of just see yourself reflected in media, and I
Yeah.
love that now we get to see a lot of cultures and people
Yeah.
reflected in our media and what we're reading, and I hope the trend continues. So before we move on to more questions, we hope that the books that we selected for Tournament of Books change or deepen a student's way of thinking. Is there a book that you read that changed or deepened your way of thinking?
Yeah, this is such a great question. Because I think about this a lot. Like I think a lot of my childhood was shaped by so many books. Like I have show and tell. I brought with me this book, which this was like the first book I thought, oh, it made me think, oh, there are themes happening in the book. There's something more than just what's on the page. It's The Little Prince. Yes, I love this book so much. This is like my pop-up version of it. But this was the first time I like realized that there was something happening beyond just the story. There was like a deeper connection that I was having that really made me think. It enlightened me in my mind, and also felt very emotional. And I was like, wow, this was really powerful for me. And then since then, actually, I started reading books with more intent. So I tab my books now, where if I like find a part I like, I'll tab it to, you know, either because it's doing something interesting craft wise, or if it's doing something theme wise interesting, or something I just really like the line. So I really read with purpose now, which is like really great for me. Like I was talking about earlier, the author I saw in person, the Asian author who I saw, her name was Cindy Pon, and she wrote a sci-fi dystopia called Want. She's Taiwanese American. Her book takes place in a futuristic Taipei, Taiwan. And I was like so influenced by her that I wrote my book, Rebel Soul, which is a sci-fi set in Seoul, South Korea. So I was like in that way, just seeing that she could do that, like really inspired me. So I think she's also like, I always talk about her. She's like a mentor to me now, which is really cool. But I think that book, The Little Prince, when I was a kid. Most recently, I read and I really loved The Wild Ones, which looks really pretty with my book.
It does. It's like same color scheme.
Yeah.
I have that on my to read list, so that
Yeah,
I'll get around
it's
to.
so beautiful. Yes, Nafisa Zad is an amazing author, and it's just a beautiful, very feminist story with like lots of wonderful characters of color, and it's just a beautiful story. And this is another book where I read an arc, so it's like I read an advanced reader's copy of this book, and then I bought the final. But my advanced reader's copy is like all tabbed. I loved it so much. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I forgot to tell you earlier, happy 1-month book anniversary for your
Yeah.
newest book, The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea.
Oh, thank you.
I requested this book in our library system. I finally got it in, so I'm like on chapter 7. I'm loving it so far. Do you want to tell us a bit more about The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea?
Yeah, so The Girl Fell Beneath the Sea is a YA fantasy reimagining of a Korean folktale. And so my character is not in the original folktale. The original folktale, which is called The Tale of Shin-chung, the character is a side character in my book. So it's like a really fun book. It's about a girl whose land is cursed by the sea god with like terrible storms, and she has to dive into the sea and go to the spirit realm in order to figure out what's going on and how to help her people. And while there, she meets like really fun side characters. She meets a boy, and it's just like a really fun, like it's very K-drama-esque too, and it's like if you like Hayao Miyazaki, it's very like Ghibli-esque too. And it's another story where it was kind of like I wasn't seeing any Korean fantasy on the shelves, so I was like, well, I want to write a Korean fantasy. So it's kind of like that's also something that I had that thought.
And thank you for doing that, because I'm enjoying it so far. And my colleague just heard you tell us more about the book, and she went, ooh. So she's excited. I think she's going to check it out. So I do have a question from Victoria Tomball. She said, what is your advice to girls on publishing a book as a woman and the challenges you face being published because you're a woman?
Oh, what a good question. Yeah, I mean, it's wonderful that there's so many wonderful women of color, women authors in publishing. Like I said, Cindy Pon earlier, the author of Want, she became a mentor to me as I started publishing. Same with Nafisa, who I mentioned earlier, who wrote The Wild Ones. We actually were critique partners first. So she and I met before either of us were published, and we met in like writing groups that were safe because they were all like women writing groups, and we encourage each other. I have a lot of critique partners that are all women who support me. We support each other, and we have these safe spaces with each other. And we encourage each other. There's definitely when you're a published author, you're obviously a public person in a way. I mean, there's conversation about whether published authors how public they have to be, but I mean, YA is one of those things where it's kind of like your publisher kind of expects you to be on, social media, on Instagram, on Twitter, or whatever. So you are a public figure, but I think it's all about protecting your space, having those communities, those people who support you, show up for you, and you show up for them. And I think that is what lets me be published, is having those women supporters, those female supporters. So that would be just finding a good critique group would be my recommendation for a writer.
Okay, that's great, because I know you can, like, when you're especially writing and putting yourself out there the first time can be scary, and to have a group of women or a group of friends supporting you and encouraging you, that does wonders. We have a few more questions coming in. So one question asked, I'm sure you get this question a lot, but A, how long did it take you to write this book? I'm assuming XOXO. And B, does the plot unfold for you as you write, or do you outline exactly what will happen in advance?
I think it's different for every book. XOXO didn't take very long. So okay, I'll show. XOXO took 3 months. The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea took 8 years. So, wait, to write it. So
Yeah.
XOXO took 3 months to write. Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea took maybe not 8 years, maybe 4 years of drafting / revising, right? So it's just different. XOXO, I had a synopsis. It was like a 2-page synopsis that I sent it to my editor, and I was like, this is what I'm going to write. And then I sat down to write it, and it was completely different. The whole book. And then I wrote it, and it sort of just came out. It's like, it was in first person. It was just so much fun. It was kind of like, maybe because I read so many contemporaries and I watch so many K-dramas, it like flowed out of me where I was like, it was like really fun to write. And then Girl was a little bit harder, not necessarily to write, but also to publish, because I tried to publish it back in 2016, and the atmosphere for YA fantasy with Asian protagonists wasn't as strong as it is now. So I'm so grateful that my publisher did pick up this book. So I think it's just about timing and the type of book, like a rom-com contemporary versus a fantasy, which you could do a lot more world building. And I don't necessarily outline, but I know the ending. I always know the ending, and I know like big scenes that happen throughout. So it's like, it's fun for me because I'm like, oh, how did I get to that scene? I have to hit it. So I'll like write toward that scene. I'm like, okay, and then I'll write toward another scene. And then as I write, I outline. So I will, after I finish like writing 5 chapters, I'll be like, okay, what happens next? And I'll outline the next 5 chapters. And then I'll write them, and then I'll outline. So I don't do a full outline in the beginning, just because, I know myself and I go way off track. But I do outline as I write.
Okay, so it's like setting goals, like I'm gonna do this 5 chapters and then make sure I hit those plot lines.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we have a question from Taylor. She said, Axie, what is your favorite genre to write?
Oh, that's so hard because I've written all 3 genres. You know what? I don't have a favorite genre. I thought it was fantasy. My first book I ever wrote was a fantasy that was never published. Thank goodness. But I used to think that was my favorite genre to write, just because that was like the genre that I was always like, I really want to publish YA fantasy, because that was my favorite genre to read, especially retellings. Like, I loved retellings growing up. But now I'm very like, I'm also a writer who writes based on feeling. I'm also a reader who reads based on feeling. So if I'm not feeling a book, I'll put it down and be like, I'm going to read it later. I'm going to read what I want to read right now. There's a word for that. I think it's like,
I can't think of it, but I'm the same way. You have to be in a certain mood to read a certain
mood
book.
reader.
Yeah, mood reader. Okay.
Yeah, I'm also a mood writer. So like right now I'm working on a fantasy, and I'm having so much fun. But I'm very like, I don't have a favorite. I don't think. They're all different. Like after I work on this fantasy, I want to work on a different genre, because I'll be like, okay, I'm done with fantasy for a little bit. So I think it's just based on my mood.
Yeah, and it's a different creative challenge for you.
Yeah.
Moving from one thing to the other. Do you see that when you're writing different genres, do you notice that is your writing process the same, or do you notice that when you're writing certain genres, you do something different?
My writing process is the same for every genre. I guess there's more work goes into a fantasy because there's more world building involved. There's more on the page. You have to explain more things in a way where with a contemporary, you don't necessarily have to. My contemporary is a little different because it takes place in Seoul, which I know the majority of English-speaking readers won't necessarily know everything about Seoul. So it did help that my main character is new to Seoul, because then I could introduce the world through her eyes. So like the reader could be like, okay, so this is like a new world. So world building, there is world building in contemporary, and more if it's in a country that's not like an English speaking Western country. But with fantasy, I do think with the world building is a little bit more involved. So the writing is the same, as in I still do the thing where I write in increments. But I will do a lot more front-end world building for a fantasy. Well, I'll be like, okay, what does the world look like in terms of the setting, what does that mean for all the rules? Like I will do all of like the, I guess it's like called the story Bible for a fantasy, which I will not do for a contemporary.
Now I know with your books you posted on your Spotify playlist for each book. So do you listen to different music when you're writing, or is that music inspired that certain book?
Yeah, I usually when I write, it's usually whatever album just came out. So I don't have like a specific, the album, my Spotify, I made for XXO. So I actually didn't listen to those songs while writing XXO. I wrote the book and then I was like, okay, I'm going to make a playlist for readers where every song will sort of correspond with the chapter. So I think there's like 40 songs in the playlist. There's 40 chapters. But when I wrote the book, I just like exclusively listened to, I think at the time, BTS's latest album was out, and I just listened to all of the songs that were on it. It was on the song on, and then so like with Girl Fell Beneath the Sea, it's the same thing where it's not about like, so there's two sort of like playlists for me. One is whatever is just came out and I'm listening to it constantly. So I listen to like the same 5 songs like over and over and over again while I write. But then I'll make a playlist after that's like themed to the book, like just with all the different songs that I like. So that's sort of how I do that in terms with music.
And when you hear those songs now, do you like think back to your writing process? Like, yeah. I remember when I was writing this chapter.
Yeah. There's some songs where it's like, because I do a thing where like I pick an album and I'm like, this represents this book.
Yeah.
Usually IU albums, like I said, I'm a huge IU fan, so I'm like, this IU album represents this book, this IU album represents that book. I do that.
Oh my gosh, I love that. So we have another question from the audience. They wanted to know, are you a fan of the rom-com genre, either in books or movies?
Yes, I'm a huge fan.
Do you have a favorite?
Favorite rom-com movie? I think it's like all the late 90s, early 2000s films, like Clueless.
10 Things I Hate About You.
10 Things I Hate About You, yeah. All those classics. So good. Never Been Kissed, like Sandra Bullock, Drew Barrymore, those sort of films that they did. So good. She's All That. So all of those like classic 90s rom-coms, I love those. I love a lot of K-drama rom-coms. True Beauty. There's some happening right now that I'm not watching that I know are supposed to be really good, but I'm not watching them right now because I'm trying to write this book. But True Beauty, I really love. Now I'm like blanking on. Crash Landing on You is really popular K-drama. It's on Netflix.
That's been on my to-watch list, so I should get to that.
Good. And you should watch it because the actors are getting married in real life.
Really?
And they fall in love on that set. It's true love.
So happy ending for them too.
Yes.
Okay, so another question came in. An audience wants to know, what's next for you? Are you working on another novel?
Yes, I'm working on another fantasy that I'm really excited about. It's very different than Girl. It's more of like an epic fantasy. Mm-hmm. So it's like another challenge. Like I always, with every book I write, I'm like, what would be really difficult? Or like, what would be so different than the last book I wrote? Let me challenge myself. But also like, what do I want to write? Because I like challenges and I like new things because I'm such a big reader. Like I love that we're talking at the library because I love the library. And I love reading like all different genres. So to me, it's like a fun challenge to write in different genres. So I'm still writing fantasy, but it's not a retelling. It's just, I guess the genre would be second world fantasy, like their subgenre. So I'm working on that. Yeah, so having a lot of fun. Yeah.
That's exciting. We'll have to keep an eye on it, out for it. We have a few more questions. Do you base any of your characters on people in real life? And if so, do you need it to clear it from them first? And if not, do you recognize themselves, or do if your friends or whoever you base characters on recognize a character is based on them?
No, I don't. I think sometimes when you write a person, that person doesn't. They may be unrealistic in a book for some reason. That's how I think. Like if I wrote my sister into the book, I don't know if I could capture, like if I just wrote her into the book, it wouldn't be as natural of just creating a character for like maybe a characterized version of her that's like a really weird version of her. She would hate that, so I'm not gonna do that. But yeah, I don't. It's more like I'm inspired by relationships I have. So like my relationship with my grandmother inspired my Jenny's relationship with her grandmother, because my grandmother is a total sweetheart. So that inspired me. Actually, in my first book, there's a character there's like a hot boy character, and I did base him off someone. I never told him. He has no idea.
That was my follow-up question. Did he know about that?
Yeah, did he know? Probably not. But I took his name.
Uh-huh.
That's a very common name. It's just Alex. So I took his name. I gave it to us like a hot boy side character. But besides that, no, I've never like actually. I mean, I've taken names before. I've definitely I've like taken names. I haven't told them.
They'll find out when they read it.
Yeah, with like, and I took like all my friends' names who I studied abroad with and put them in the book, but the characters are completely different. So it's just their names. So, and then it's never a mean character. I guess if it was a bad character, I would try not to do that.
Yeah.
But like, for example, Angela in XOXO, she's named after like my friend named Angela. When I studied abroad in Seoul, she wasn't my roommate, but she was one of my friends.
And Angela in the book, she's such a sweet character and always supportive, and she's a fun side character.
Yeah.
So you said you study abroad. Did that go into XOXO experiences?
Yeah, I definitely, not necessarily people, but I definitely take experiences that I've had and put them in the book. Not necessarily like actual experiences, but like I went to show when I was in Seoul. I had a relative who actually was like could get me backstage to some shows. So I actually went backstage for a lot of K-pop. They're called weekly music shows. So like there's like every week they'll have a music show like called like Music Core, Inkigayo. It's like every week they have it basically. And so I used to go to one of those every week when I would visit while I was studying abroad, and I could like my name was on a list and they like let me backstage, and so like I saw idols like walking around like backstage, so like I knew what that was like, so I put that in my book. So they'd be like, well look, I did experience that, so I could put that in the book where there's a little bit of it does happen, right? So there could be some authenticity to this specific scene, so things like that. And then when I studied abroad in Seoul, we did lots of field trips to the countryside, and so like I put that in where the characters go on a 2-day 1-night trip to like camping. Well, it's glamping.
Camping, yeah. And you have all the other schools there, and they have like coordinated shirts. And
so like it was like so much fun. Like I experienced things like that. So I was like, I'll put that into the book and then just make it more fun.
Yeah. And I love that advice that Jenny's grandmother kind of told her about reaching out, like your roommate, make friends with her, because she'll be a friend for life. And those little nuggets in there. And speaking of grandmothers also, because I started The Girl Beneath the Sea, I love how you talk about the grandmother being a storyteller, like all grandmothers are. And it made me think of my own grandmother, who was very much a storyteller.
Yeah.
Yes, all grandmothers are storytellers.
Yeah, I think like the quote is like, not all storytellers are grandmothers, but all grandmothers are storytellers.
Yes, thank you. I should have wrote it down.
Because I agree with that. My grandmothers are all storytellers. Like they've lived such a wonderful or such a long life that they have so much story to tell.
So it looks like we have a few more questions. Jennifer wants to know, have you used the library resources to do research for any of your books?
Yes, I have. Besides just like reading like a lot of fiction, which I think are resources because you're learning like craft. I have taken out craft books on writing. I've taken out books on soul architecture, Korean architecture, Korean history. I've taken out a lot of books from I've taken out poetry books, like Korean poetry, to like get into that, because I like worked on a historical fiction book once, and I was like, okay, so I need to do some research in terms of like what the language was like then. So yeah, I love using physical resources, but also when I was when I studied, I used all of the electronic resources too, which are great. Now I don't have access to those electronic resources. Does your library do a lot of like electronic resources?
We do. We have databases. So yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
So
Gotta use your library.
we'll set you up with a library card after this.
Yeah, I love the library. Yeah, I go like every 2 weeks and get books and drop off books. And I love manga, so the library is great for that, because you can read like so many manga and then like get them all, like all of them, read them all.
With a whole shelf. And so my kind of follow-up question to that: do you prefer ebooks or actual books?
I prefer physical books, just because I just love like touching them. I'm very tactile, like, and I like to put bookmarks in. I like doing the tab thingy I do. But I also like ebooks. I like audiobooks. I like to listen to audiobooks and do other things like chores. So that's fun, doing you listen to audiobooks, and like I listen to audiobooks and play games. So that's really fun. So, but yeah, I've always preferred the physical book, just because I'm very tactile.
Yeah, ebooks are great when you're traveling, because I
Yeah.
can have like 5 books on my Libby
Yeah.
app, and just like I'm ready to go on
Yep.
this trip. So David would like to know, can you recommend some writing craft books?
Yes. My favorite writing craft book is Lisa Cron, LISACRON, Story Genius. It's just wonderful. I use that always in the second. So after I write my book, I use that to help me revise it, because it's really good at sort of asking you questions that you'll know the answer to after finishing the book. It's harder using the book before writing these are specific craft books that help you specifically with writing, because there's also books that are like, I love Diana Wynne Jones' Reflections. It's so good. It's a library book. I love this book. It's not a craft book, but it's her life, where she talks about all of her life. Diana Wynne Jones is a famous author. She wrote Howl's Moving Castle. This is for your teens. Nope. Howl's Moving Castle. She wrote the Chrestomanci series. She wrote so many wonderful books. The Howl's Moving Castle is the book that Hayao Miyazaki's animated film was based off of. But in her essays, she gives so much advice. It's not necessarily craft focused, but it's like writing advice. It's so inspirational to me. Like, I love reading those type of books. So there's 2 different type of books. I like reading books that authors write about their own experiences, their own, writing, what they've learned from their own publishing journey. And then I also love specifically craft books, which teach you specifically like character arc. They teach you like plot, all that kind of thing. So Lisa Cron, Story Genius, and Anatomy of the Story. I forgot the author's name, but those are the 2 that I use like all the time.
Okay. And I have not read her essays, Diana Wynne Jones. Yeah, I love Howl's Moving Castle as a kid, the book, and even the movie. They're different in their own way, but I love them both equally.
Yeah.
So I have to check out her
it's really good, and she's really funny. They're like funny too, because it's like she's giving you practical advice, but she's also like making a lot of jokes, so it's really funny.
That does not surprise me as much. It's funny how is in the book. Okay, so do you have a favorite K-pop concert memory?
Oh wow, so many. Favorite K-pop concert memory. Yeah, I mean, definitely those concerts in Seoul were so much fun, because they're like, like I said, I got to go backstage. I got to bring my friends. So like I would bring like a different group of friends every week. I'd be like, okay, you. And then we'd go, and it was really fun, because you watch the rehearsals and you watch the live show. So it was really cool, because I got to watch. So I would watch, like, for example, at the time Shiny was promoting. Shiny is a boy group, and they're promoting their first debut. They're promoting Replay. If you guys, any Shiny fans out there, so I watched them perform that song like 5 times because they like did the rehearsal. They did the shot. They performed it for different angles, and then they did the live where they brought in a crowd. They brought in an audience, like the people who would stand in front of the stage and like shout. So that was really cool because I was like, they had to perform it so many times, like and look good. I was like, so how tiring is that? You had the whole song and dance. And I don't think they do that anymore. I think that was more like if you're a debut, you kind of have to do that because you're not. I think like nowadays, like if BTS does these shows, they only have to do it once. They don't have to do it multiple times. But I remember thinking that was so cool that I got to watch it multiple times and that they could do it so many times,
and get it right every time in their costume, in their their costumes.
And I love that they had to film different shots, I think. So there was like a live portion. Like some of them were live, but some of them were not. So that was kind of cool. Like I don't know what maybe they like show the live, but then like the replay is not the live. I don't know. I have no idea what was going on, but it was really fun. But I've seen BTS in concert. I'm seeing them next month.
You got tickets,
yeah. I live in Las Vegas.
Oh, that's right. Okay, yeah, I had friends who were trying to get tickets and couldn't.
Yeah. And I was like, I mean, I didn't get the tickets. My sister did, so she did all the work.
She waited in the waiting room for you.
She waited in the wait room. But yeah, I've seen them. They're so good in concert. I saw them also at the American Music Awards, the first I think American show they did in the U.S. I saw them there too. That was really cool.
I bet it was. So I'm gonna throw one last question out for you, and then that'll be it. In the book XOXO, we know that Uncle Jay and Jenny's dad had a karaoke bar. What is your go-to karaoke song?
Oh my gosh, what a good question. My go-to karaoke song is BTS's Spring Day. I love that song. I also love any Britney Spears. I love doing the Britney Spears voice while singing. She has a very distinctive voice. I like to mimic her. But I also do that not in Korean karaoke because Korean karaoke is private rooms. I've also done public karaoke, and that's like a whole different beast. But yeah, like Britney Spears, classic. But if I was going to do K-pop, it would be something that's easier, Spring Day, but not the rap parts, just the chorus. And then I like Ihyori. So Ihyori is like she was on Netflix on a show, but she's like a first generation K-pop idol. And she was in a group called Finkel, and I love their songs. So I can do any of their songs. I can do because they're also really easy. Anything that's easy. Nowadays, these K-pop songs are so difficult. But I can do choruses for a lot of songs. I like So, but when I get together with my cousin, who's also an author, Kat Cho, who wrote Wicked Fox, we're related.
Really? I didn't know that.
When we get together, it's K-pop all day, all long.
That's so awesome. And I know when I do karaoke, always my go-to song is "Wannabe" by Spice Girls because I can bring someone else up there with me. Yeah, I'm not singing this alone.
Especially when you go with your girlfriends, you're like, hey, what's a good song? "Wannabe," Britney, all the good classics.
Exactly. Well, it's been a lot of fun talking to you today. I know we had a bit of problem in the beginning, but it's been a lot of fun having you. And thank you so much, Axie, for joining us. And we love your book, XOXO, and we look forward to reading more from you.
Thank you so much, Angela. I had so much fun chatting with you, and thank you everyone for sending questions. This is so much fun.
Yes. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and be sure to tune in tomorrow at 6:30, same time. We'll talk to author JL, the author of Wings of Ebony. Have a great night, everyone.